Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and today we are sitting down with Eddie Campbell. Eddie is the Chief Operating Officer at ABSI, which is a steel building and modeling company for industrial and commercial industries. He's also a host of the Construction Brothers podcast with his brother Tyler, so that's super cool. So today we're going to talk about the pre-planning process for construction, how to manage those challenges and problems that come down through the trickle-down effect, and also how construction technology enables better collaboration on the job sites as well as off the job sites. And then, of course, how that all impacts and improves company culture overall. So hello, Eddie, and thanks for joining the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We're really excited about being here, man.
Yeah, it's gonna be an awesome conversation. I'm actually in Beaver Creek, Colorado, just outside of Vail at an event today. So a little different background, but apologies for the hustle and bustle of trying to get this thing rolling from the road. But I think we're in good shape.
No, we're good. Good for you. Sounds like a fun trip.
Yeah. It's actually a CFMA event. We've had the CEO of CFMA, Stuart Binstock, on the podcast a couple different times. Had some great conversations, and we at WorkMax and About Time love CFMA and everything they stand for. So not sure if you're familiar with that organization, but it's definitely a good one for construction.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Love it. So, well, first off, let's just talk about this planning process that contractors have to continually face. And of course, the way that impacts their projects that are coming down the line. What can you share with us about those challenges?
Yeah, we like to say that we are kind of at the bottom end of the construction food chain. That we're generally the subcontractor of a subcontractor of a subcontractor. Sometimes, I mean, we really are kind of the end of the road. By trade, we're using BIM to generate shop drawings. We're working under steel fabricators, sometimes engineers, design builders, general contractors, but because we're kind of in this sub-tier position, we kind of say we're on the bottom of the pond looking up. And because of that vantage point, we're able to look up and see a lot of the flaw in the industry because all of those decisions made and all of those things that have been done to kind of cast the die and set the ball in motion for a project, well, they eventually stop somewhere. And when you're at the bottom, well, stuff rolls downhill, and it usually rolls downhill until it gets to us, So, I mean, when we're taking a project apart and trying to do our portion of the project, and we're picking at it and trying to make things work, it's easy to look up and see how poor planning, poor structure, too much reliance on technology in many ways, poor collaboration, poor communication, end up impacting a project in a negative way. And in many times we see it delaying schedule and things not going to plan. And so nobody likes being there. It's supposed to go to plan. It's supposed to be built just like the general contractor plan, like the owner expected. And, when you set it up wrong, it's very hard to achieve those goals.
Yeah. So when you run into those snags or challenges, how would you describe that trickle down effect that can kind of balloon up and be a problem down the road? Do you have a good way to describe that for the listeners?
Yeah. Well, in some ways, what we see, the devil's in the details a lot of times for us, when things are left undone or pushed off for later, many times that is going to have a much larger impact on the project than it should have had. Things get blown out of proportion. We like to look at, the structure of things a lot and look at how are things set up. We've got this steel detailing thing that we do now, and we're really in kind of this LOD 400, 450 BIM realm, right? But the background's in general contracting. So my dad's a general contractor. I've got my contracting license. Like, so the heart is really like living in that general contracting realm. We've worked around a lot of, the architectural and engineering firms. So we see what they're doing. And then we've been able, even through the podcast, to visit with owners and see how projects get initiated. And everybody's got to do their part, right? Like the owner has a part in setting a project up, making sure that the project is viable, is being well planned, that they're hiring good designers, that they're setting up good pay structures. And so what we have kind of seen from our vantage point is like, as these things don't happen and things start to unravel, we get what we like to say is behind the airplane. And when you're flying behind the airplane as a pilot, that's a bad deal, right? You want to stay in front of the thing that's happening, because when things start going down in the air, that's not good. Things start to move very fast on you. We see project managers, that seems to be the standard MO, is just like, rather than getting in front of it, rather than planning it, rather than thinking, I'm going to take a tactical pause and I'm going to think about what we're about to do. It's go. And that really comes to the detriment of projects. It's just not rounding out the thinking on something before we do it.
Do you think that's a construction thing? Do you think that's a people thing? I mean, what did your experience tell you about that?
Planning's hard, right? I mean, sitting down and planning feels like doing nothing, but it's not. Good, solid planning leads to more efficiency, leads to a better result, leads to better quality. And so when you're thinking about, well, I'm going to delay a project, like I'm going to sit here for the next 3 weeks, rounding out the details and communicating with the people around me, making sure that we know the things that we need to know. That feels like doing nothing, but in many ways, that will be the accelerator that pushes the project faster than it should have gone. And it's very seldom that we find a group of people that are willing to really kind of take that pause, spend that time, and make sure that the product, the building, the structure is fully baked before we let it out in the wild and try to make it a real thing.
Yeah, I like that term, let it out in the wild. It's like in construction, we want to see the dirt flying and the hammer swinging, and we can't wait to get that project going, to feel like we're actually moving forward. So I think you're right.
Yeah, a little anecdote. It was 2 days ago. We got a call because general contractors really wanting us to do some laser scanning for them. And so we're going to go out to site, do some verification of what's been put out. And the general contractor's reasoning for trying to accelerate the project is that the owner was going to make a site visit and the owner needed to see progress. Like, it was just, it wasn't strictly to actually complete the project. It wasn't to hit a milestone that was on some schedule. It was just that the owner kind of thinks we should be vertical by now and we're not. So we have to show some action, and scheduling in itself a lot of times turns into that. It's box checking, it's hitting those nodes that come out on the critical path schedules, just making sure that I show some kind of action. A lot of times, I mean, we can flail, we can move our arms real fast and act like we're running fast, but that doesn't mean that we're actually going somewhere fast. So yeah, it's a problem, but I would say it's not an easy one. It takes some self-discipline, and it's going to take some industry discipline for us to figure this out. And that'll open doors for a lot of the modular, a lot of the kitting, all that DFMA stuff that people talk about, the design for manufacturing and assembly, like all of that stuff bleeds out of better planning, which touches anything from the environmental concerns we have to the efficiency concerns we have, because we're terribly inefficient as an industry.
Yeah, it's tough to build things. It's and when you got so many hands in the pot, you're really it's a communication thing, right? A lot more than skills.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty well statistically borne out that we are the most inefficient industry, and that gets parroted again and again and again. The question I have is, what are we doing about it? And then what are we pointing our finger at and saying, well, maybe that's the root cause? How are we getting back to the root cause instead of just throwing a band-aid on the symptoms? And some of those root causes are interesting.
Yeah, your point about the planning, I mean, one of my favorite quotes is to fail to plan is a plan to fail, and I believe in that, and I think that has to do with life, not just construction or building or running a business, but it's everything you do. You really should have a thought out plan before you really engage in something that's of any importance.
Well, sure. And, that in some ways, that's kind of a self serving axe for me to grind because a lot of BIM is like, that is planning, right? That is like, I want to pour more detail into the BIM. And here we are, like, we do detailed BIM. So it's like, well, that's kind of a self serving thing. Um, but I mean, we've seen it work, right? We see projects that are well planned. We see documents that are good documents. We see designers that have had the time to do their job. And then we've seen the byproduct of when an owner or general contractor leans on a set of designers and makes them do their work too fast. Or, I mean, we had a project we were working off of, get ready for this, 30% documents. I mean, I didn't even know we really issued much of anything at 30%, but 30%, and we're actually progressing towards construction. And I think revisions have gone from like revision 12 to changing to letters, and we're now on like M. It's insane. How can you hit that moving target? So there's all that, but then there's another side of it, which is uh, maybe less self-serving and more just when you talk to people on a podcast, you get to have the benefit of learning. Um, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to go for you today, but for me, when I have people on my podcast, I get to learn, and when I get to do that, and I just get to soak in, it's amazing how many really, really intelligent people are out there in construction, and how many people have different perspectives because there are just so many different realms that we come from in construction. So I could put my finger on BIM or technology or anything like that, but that's just one little facet of it. We're trying to steer the whole thing. I mean, contractual structure, the way we all work together. There's a group out there working on operating system 2.0 for the construction. They're calling OS 2.0, which is looking at these things like, how do we contract with one another? How do we pay each other? How might we integrate blockchain into how we get paid so that it's not like 90 to 120 days before you get money, so that contractors aren't, I mean, the leading cause of contractors going belly up is cash flow, right? So how do we have verifiable and good subs? How do we look at the insurances that we're requiring, making sure that we've not doubled or tripled up on insurances and overinsured a project or underinsured it? So just the whole ecosystem of construction needs a good hard look. Um, and I mean, there are plenty of things that we can point a finger at, but a lot of that really is like just stopping and thinking before we move forward in building that next thing. But that's hard. I mean, the world moves fast and people need things and it doesn't necessarily feel great.
Yeah, right. I agree with you on the point that we can learn a lot from those guests on the podcast. I learn every episode. I love those new perspectives. And I think getting a global picture of the whole process and getting a handle on that is something that I've really been able to do even more than I was ever able to do as an acting general contractor because my head was buried. I was working on my projects. I was worried about my stuff, worrying about the industry and the economy and all these other things that impact what I'm doing were, way back in my mind. And, I just wasn't aware enough of those things. And I think getting that extra perspective is critical for the modern contractor to be efficient and to compete and to remain profitable and solvent.
Yeah. I mean, hats off to the project managers out there too. I mean, that's a tough seat to sit in. I mean, if you've sat there, it's easy for me to, from the outside looking in, say, well, you're behind the airplane. You need to plan better, and that'll just solve your problems. But when you come in for the day with a plan and then the firefight starts at like 6:30 in the morning and you're like, well, I mean, I guess any plan I had for my day has now gone away because this is a legitimate emergency. It's easy to turn into more of a fireman than anything and just feel like that's what your day is, just putting out one after another.
Yeah, I think, and to your point, I mean, there's a balance. I mean, we can plan until we're blue in the face, but eventually someone does have to move some dirt. Someone does have to swing a hammer. We have to, aiming, you know, endlessly does never fire anything. I mean, you gotta pull the trigger. And so I think the big thing, and I know I learned this on our podcast all the time with a lot of guests, and you probably hear it too, but I don't know necessarily. I think the software and the technology is better than ever. I think we have an overabundance of tools and resources to help us. I think the people are still the variable in this equation, don't you?
Oh yeah, couldn't agree more. That is, I think, the crux of our problems. It's our ability to grasp that there is improvement that we need to make and that it's not just going to come at the hands of some tool or technology that we have. That our ability to talk with one another, to empathize with one another, to work together, to actually work as teams. I mean, you hear the teamwork and collaboration, all of the buzzy things that we're just like done hearing, like, oh my gosh, they said it again. And but it's so true. We are still working at trying to, instead of building a building in spite of each other, build a building with each other. And I mean, so many times, I mean, how many times does a general contracting team or even an owner get done with a project, sit there and think about everything that went down and say, man, I really wish I could do that again with those people. That was awesome. Like I really, you might have pockets, you might have a few, but I mean, very seldom are we like, most projects are, thank God it's done. I'm, on to the next one. And so, I mean, just creating more positive experiences by having people work together. I mean, that's kind of the core of what we're doing, right? We're just trying to get people to align for a common goal. We had a really cool story from Mr. Lee Evie, who was put in charge of the Pentagon renovation and was actually there during the 9/11 event. And to hear that man talk about how he brought people together and aligned them, his whole thing, he delivered this job. I mean, it was, man, what were the stats? It's $1 billion project. I think it was like 100 million under budget and a year ahead of schedule. I mean, this is like, it's insane to think about somebody doing that. The guy was a psychology major, and he was like, some of the other things he was involved in was like negotiating with the Russians for the International Space Station and its usage. Like, he's just like, he was like the government go-to guy for special projects. And then he turned him on the Pentagon projects. He's got no previous experience in construction. And then he has this rave success story. And why? You ask him and he's like, because I aligned people and I got them working for a common purpose. And I helped them to see that what they do every day is really dang cool. You get to build something today, and someday you're going to drive past this with your kids and you're going to say, hey, I helped build that. And it doesn't matter if you just place some rebar in the end of it. I'm sorry. If you were on the Pentagon project, you will drive by it with your kids and say, I helped build that. And if we get that mentality out there a little more, get alignment. I mean, to hear that kind of success story out of somebody that's not a construction theoretician, he's just somebody who knows people. Psychology degree, special education degree. And this guy brings people together in a way that's so significant that he's got a dream job by the end of it. Like this thing's storied. So, I mean, that to me, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That is a story that is just proof that when you can get people to align, that is the key. And It's funny that same guy, Lee, was telling me a lot of times he'll kind of walk away from speaking engagements where people that are in technology ask him to speak because they come to him and they're like, Lee, you did this amazing thing on the Pentagon project. Tell me about the special technology that you used. Tell me about the special tools. Like, was it BIM? Was it BIM? Did you use some sort of new material? Was there something? And he's like, no, nope. It's just good old school aligning the people and good old school leadership. So yeah, the tools are awesome. Technology is great. I love it. I use it every day and I geek out over it, but it's not the answer.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, in that regard, then really construction, I mean, the materials and the tools to do things have changed quite a bit and mostly just more efficient. But the communication side of things is, like we said earlier, it's just people working together, it's just communication, having empathy, recognizing that the project doesn't revolve around you, so to speak. That's a great story. I hadn't heard that one before. I will have to look that up and learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it's, I mean, buckle up. It's about a 2-hour episode. And but I think worth the price of admission. And, hearing that and learning the lessons from it and thinking about where we're at, it gives me some hope that I do think that rather than being a complainer in the industry, trying to be an agent of change, being a voice that's encouraging the people around, like think, plan, try to operate together, align, use technology as a tool, but don't believe that the tool is the craftsman. Those are big. And I'll go you one more. This is kind of an interesting, and this is kind of a personal theory, so you can take it and do what you will with it. But as business people, the career cycle that we go through is very fast now in comparison to our predecessors. My grandfather, who was a civil engineer and progressed through Messer Construction, from being a carpenter to being a senior project executive, was there for 40 something years, like 45 years, right? So the projects he was handed and the projects that he managed, I mean, he was 5 to 10 years older than I was when he started getting large projects to manage himself. And his tenure was something of remark. And he stayed in the craft. Like many times we are, we're promoted and promoted and promoted and promoted because we're trying to get to the goal of retirement as quickly as possible. I want to be done with this. In a day gone by, people didn't have quite the same mentality about that. And they learned their craft and they expected to be there a minute. There was pride in being a carpenter. There was pride in being a pipe fitter and doing that for a career where the expertise that lived there in those realms was immense. And, I don't want to over glorify what's gone by. There are so many ways we've improved and we've come a long way in so many things, but, it's tough. I mean, when were you first named a project manager? I'm curious. Like, at what point in your career, like how old were you?
I was probably 23. I started at about just out of high school. So I had a few years experience by then, but yeah, I was young.
So you're 23 years old. And then, I mean, and this is what we see, like a lot of times these are, the people around us that we're dealing with. I had shop drawings rejected and returned the other day at the hands of a project intern that had been in a company for 2 months. With a lot of highly technical verbiage that, I mean, it was youth and zeal, right? So there's something to be applauded there. That's awesome. I'm like, go get it, man. Don't lose that fire. At the same time, there's something to be said for tenure and being able to hone your craft and be a builder. And that's something that I know we've come to again and again and again. Love construction, love building, and actually want to learn your craft and learn your trade.
Yeah, and learn and I something that I don't think we can put too fine a point on. Even construction. I mean, yeah, it's about the building, it's about the project, but really, it's about the people. I mean, you're providing for families, you're providing incomes, you're providing safety, you're providing healthcare, you're providing food. I mean, all these things. The project's just the excuse to have that experience all occur. And then you're providing for a business, a place to generate profit and to feed their employees' families. I mean, it's about people. This whole thing's about people, and I think that companies that don't lose sight of that, and I keep learning that on the podcast. Company culture and some of the things that communication and working together, like you said, having teamwork and collaborating and being proud of what you're doing because it's the right thing to do as you work with others. Is something that makes all the difference in the world. Because at the end of the day, it's just steel and concrete and drywall and wood, and it's lifeless. So
yeah, I'm at the doctor's office. It's probably a year and a half ago, and I'm talking with this guy's general physician, and we're just kind of talking. It's like checkup, whatever, and I asked him a question. He just came back to me. He said, like 99% of my job is telling people things they should already know, like get enough sleep, eat right, try to reduce your stress. Like it was just things that you learn in middle school health, and you're like, oh, why do I have to even sit here? But it's the truths are there, like exercise. In construction, I don't feel like the things that make us successful are so high and lofty and far off that we can't attain them. Like in some ways, the things that we need to be doing are kind of like the simple fundamentals of life, like treating each other fairly, like treating the person across from you the way that you would want to be treated would be a huge one. And there have been businesses built off of that are incredible. Ritz-Carlton being one that springs to mind. Treating people fair, not lying to one another, do the right thing is something you just said, which really triggered that in my mind. There are some fundamentals that I think would really go a long way, that if we all operated under those terms, the contract would come out a whole lot less. The lawyers after that would come out a whole lot less. People would get paid on time. We'd show up when we said we were going to show up, or have a viable reason for why that was excusable for us not to do so. Like there are just some basic things that, I mean, project schedules would be much easier to maintain if everybody did what they said. It would take a lot of variable out, just not getting lied to about when the guy was going to get to site. So I think some basic fundamentals would really help us out as an industry, and I don't think they're unattainable. And that's why I think just keep encouraging people. Let's do that thing. Let's be those people, and let's not be the industry that's earmarked for the worst efficiency. Let's get out of that.
I love that. Great advice. What role do you think the owner plays in all of this process? Because I know depending on the owner, this totally changes the attitude and the approach of the project and how it's managed and whatnot. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the owner kind of like sets the tone for the project in so many ways. I know the architect or design builder, I mean, just like depending on how you structure things, they set a tone for the project. But I mean, think about how projects come to be, and then think about what owner means. So owner might mean a college, owner might mean a hospital that build a lot, right? And they've got probably like building programs and people that handle this thing, owners representatives that are very savvy. Owner could mean a doctor. Owner could mean a owner. I mean, there's just so many realms, right? And then how we come about, how do we initiate a project? I mean, that could be, I have an actual like 1,000-page document that defines exactly how I have to initiate a project when I do it, because I'm within this giant organization, mid-cap company that makes me do it this way. And I will check all of these boxes and I cannot do this. Or I'm in this state and the Board of Regents says, and it goes all the way over to like that one-time builder at the golf course, kind of mentioning to a buddy, and I've been thinking about building my own office, And so the initiation of those two projects are vastly different. And the trajectories of those projects are vastly, vastly different. And so does the owner have a role in setting tone? Yeah, you better believe it. That's why having an industry with discipline will help this problem. I don't think that we can point and say, hey, owners, do it this way. I mean, to advocate for just one process, different projects will require a different process. And I think we can, need to acknowledge that one process may work better for one project than another. Coming up with ways to advocate for owners and help them identify that before they go build a building might be a really good project for somebody to undertake, to just be there. And I'm not talking about being an owner's organization, and we know a few and they're great and they do a lot of really good advocacy, but I'm talking about a place where somebody who wants to build a building can find a lot of good information about that, in a format that helps coach them through maybe best processes, that's unbiased and doesn't have maybe a reason for existence that comes from profit. So I don't know, just a thought, and kind of really some freewheeling thought at that.
Yeah, it's a great insight. I haven't often thought about that or heard it discussed where the general contractor or the subcontractors are approaching a project specifically based on that owner and their goals and their intent with the project. I mean, yeah, that you'll hear conversational comments or, oh boy, this guy's a real, he's a weenie, for lack of a better term, or whatever it is,
That's clean. That's cleaned up.
A personal opinion about somebody, and hey, here's your warning. But but really, stripping all that emotion away and just being practical about it, I think it's a pretty wise thing to do when you're approaching the project. Say, hey, look, here's the important goals for this owner. Here's what we got to really focus on. This guy really wants to see this progress, and so we got certain benchmarks we need to hit. And as long as we can do that, we're going to be fine, and we'll have the latitude we need to do things the way that we feel like they need to be done properly and efficiently and all that. But yeah, I think having a meeting like that about each owner would be a really effective way for companies to have a better experience.
Just having a generally published place. I mean, that we've got a lot of trade organizations that are advocating for a specific process, right? So, trying to define a process that is kind of agnostic of the right answer, like is okay with whatever the right answer is, and helps map that path. That could be useful for all of those different people that happen to find themselves with the owner hat on.
Well, this has been a super fun conversation. I have just a couple more questions before we wrap up, and we're probably gonna have to do this again because I don't know that we really got to the root of all the good stuff that we could talk about. So I guess just wrapping up, what's the one thing you would hope the listeners would take away from our conversation today?
If I could come back to anything, any one point, it would really be the people thing, particularly that golden rule, that I think a lot of positive things happen when you treat somebody else like you'd want to be treated, because it puts you in their chair, makes you empathize. And I think not only are you going to do better business, I think you're going to feel better about yourself while you do it.
Well said. So what's something you're grateful for in your professional life?
I am very grateful for the investment of people that knew more than me when I was young, people that mentored me, specifically my dad. I'm in a family business. My dad has poured into me, and I really appreciate him. And I really appreciate my team, because I get to be surrounded by a group of people that I like and that I really enjoy doing this thing with. And I appreciate my bro too. And the thing we get to do with the podcast, the work we've gotten to do together, is just very cool. So those are things that are very near and dear to me.
Yeah, family always is a special additive to the recipe, no question about it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, lastly, what is Eddie Campbell's superpower? If you had one, if you just had one to pick, I don't need the whole list, just one.
My superpower, well, you probably laugh at this, but I love kids. I love kids. My wife and I have 6 of them, and so one of my favorite things to do is just be around and cut up with kids, make them laugh, and see them as people. When I'm able to do that, it makes me feel really good about myself, because it's kind of just a good way of making sure that you see a person for a person, no matter how big or small they are, no matter how important they are or what they could do for you. That kid might not have anything to offer you, no way of furthering your career or doing anything like that. But man, if you can make one of them belly laugh, that's got to be a superpower, is making a toddler belly laugh. I don't know of too many noises in the world that are cooler than that. So, hey, maybe a cutesy answer, but I'll go with that one. I like it.
I love it, man. I think that's fantastic. Maybe one of the best ones I've heard so far. That's cool. I love kids too. I got 4 of them, not 6, but good work.
Right on, man. That's awesome.
Well, thank you again for joining. This was a lot of fun. We'll have to definitely do it again and connect up down the road. I'd really love to line something up if you're down.
Yeah, definitely. No, thanks for having me, man.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you liked the conversation we had today, or were able to learn anything new or helpful, please make sure to follow us on our WorkMax page on LinkedIn and on Instagram at WorkMax_. And subscribe to the show on iTunes or your preferred podcast platform so you will never miss another insightful episode. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review and share the show with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us and will allow us to continue providing impactful information with others looking to improve their results in their business and, in turn, their life.